The War of 1812, despite not being a true victory for Americans, was a moral victory that led to the United States truly becoming united as one nation. Even though America and Britain metaphorically tied in the War of 1812, the war proved that America could truly compete with the strongest of nations even if it was a newly formed nation. The moral victory from the War of 1812 helped America rapidly gain strength and grow over the years following until sectionalism arose in the next decade. The American regular army was unprepared on the eve of the War of 1812. Instead of attacking Montreal with their entire force to cut off all activity to the west, the American army was divided into three factions, attacking from Detroit, Niagara, and Lake Champlain. Each faction was quickly pushed back after crossing the Canadian border. Canada quickly became an important battleground in the war. New England prospered during the war before the blockade was formed. As the war continued, extremists in New England became more vocal. A small minority wanted New England to secede from the Union. The largest manifestation of this New England discontent was the Hartford Convention. Each American invasion force was quickly pushed back after crossing the Canadian border. Early in the war, the British captured Fort Michilimackinac and gained control of the Great Lakes. After another attempted land invasion in 1813, the Americans began to focus on success on the water. Compared to the British, the American ships had more skilled sailors, better gunners, and were manned by non-press gang crews who lusted for revenge. American frigates had thicker sides, heavier firepower, and larger crews. A fleet led by Oliver Hazard Perry captured a British fleet on the Great Lakes and forced the British to retreat from Detroit to Fort Malden. The retreating British were soon defeated in the Battle of Thames in October 1813. In 1814, the British attempted to invade New York, but were forced to have supplies sent over the Lake Champlain waterway, where an American fleet, led by Thomas MacDonough, defeated them near Plattsburgh on September 11, 1814. A second British invasion force that landed in Chesapeake Bay was able to march to Washington, D.C. and burn most of the capital. While Washington burned, though, the Americans were able to successfully defend Fort McHenry in Baltimore. On December 24, 1814, the Treaty of Ghent was signed, but even though the war was officially over, the British attempted to invade New Orleans, and 2 weeks after signing the treaty, an American army led by Andrew Jackson easily defeated the invading British at New Orleans. In the end, America had not truly defeated Britain, and the treaty was basically a draw. However, an awakened spirit of nationalism led to the inspiration and activities to defend the authority of the national government. The burst of American nationalism following the War of 1812 was due to America's unity as a nation. America did not enter the war as one nation. It entered as several sections supporting several ideals. The changed mood helped create distinctively national literature by authors such as James Fenimore Cooper and Washington Irving, and it helped revive the Bank of the United States in 1816. It also gave a reason to create a more handsome national capital, expand the army size to 10,000 men, and it gave the Navy more glory. The post-war of 1812 nationalism united our nation. In New England during the War of 1812, there was much Federalist extremist talk of secession. The most spectacular manifestation of this Federalist discontent was the Hartford Convention, which was not as radical as alarmists thought. It demanded financial aid from Washington to compensate for lost trade and proposed amendments. When the envoys carrying the demands from Hartford Convention arrived in Washington, D.C., they were overwhelmed by the news of the victory from New Orleans and the signing of the Treaty of Ghent, which made all of the Federalist demands seem treasonous. Because Federalists led most of the extremist actions in New England, they were no longer trusted and their political party soon collapsed. Henry Clay's American system was a scheme created by Warhawks in 1824. This system had three main parts. It began with a strong banking system, which provided easy and abundant credit. It also advocated a protective tariff, behind which Eastern manufacturing would flourish. The revenues gushing from this tariff would provide funds for the third component, a network of roads and canals, especially in the Ohio Valley. Through these arteries of transportation, trade would flourish between the South and West to the North and East. Henry Clay led in the complaints for better transportation, which struck a responsive chord with the public. There was soon an outcry for better transportation, rising mostly from the road-poor West. Attempts to secure federal funding for roads and canals stumbled on a Republican Constitution scruples, as did all of Henry Clay's American system. The era of good feelings, while tranquil and prosperous in Monroe's earlier years, was a troubled period. Issues of the tariff, the bank's internal improvements, and the sales of public land were all being hotly contested. Sectionalism was crystallizing, and the conflict of slavery was growing. in 1819, a paralyzing economic panic descended, bringing deflation, depression, bankruptcy, and unemployment. Many factors contributed to the catastrophe of 1819, but the most important was a gamble taken in the overspeculation of the West. Rivalry over the control of the West made sectionalism stronger in the free North and slave South. The Talmadge Amendment stated that no more slaves should be brought into Missouri, and also provided for the emancipation of children born into slave families already there. This angered many Southerners, Depression-cursed pioneers, and Northern Federalists. It was considered a threat to sectional balance. This made Congress think that if they could solve the peculiar institution in Missouri, it might be able to do the same with older Southern states. This led to the admission of Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state to retain the balance of free and slave states, and the repeal of the Talmadge Amendment. This was known as the Missouri Compromise. John Marshall's Supreme Court further enhanced their role as a major force upholding a powerful national government and conservative defense of property rights. Marshall's ruling partially checked the general movement toward states' rights and popular democracy. In the court case of McCulloch v. Maryland, the state of Maryland attempted to destroy the Bank of the United States by imposing a tax on its notes. John Marshall, speaking for the court, declared the bank constitutional by invoking the Hamiltonian doctrine of implied powers. By doing this, he strengthened federal authority and slapped at state infringements when he denied Maryland the right to tax the bank. In the court case of Gibbons v. Ogden, the state of New York attempted to grant to a private citizen a monopoly of waterborne commerce between New York and New Jersey. Marshall sternly reminded the state that the Constitution gave only Congress the power to control interstate commerce. This struck another blow at states' rights while upholding the sovereign powers of the federal government. In the case of Dartmouth College v. Woodward, one of Marshall's best-remembered decisions, the college had been granted a charter by King George III in 1769, but the Democratic state legislature of New Hampshire had seen fit to change it. Dartmouth appealed the case, employing Daniel Webster as its counsel. Marshall put the states firmly in their place when he ruled that the original charter must stand, for it was a contract, and the Constitution protected contracts from state encroachments. This decision safeguarded business enterprise from domination by state governments, but also created a precedent that enabled chartered corporations to escape the handcuffs of public control. The Anglo-American Convention of 1818 with Britain permitted Americans to share Newfoundland fisheries with Canadians. This agreement fixed the vague northern limits of Louisiana along the 49th parallel from the Lake of the Woods, Minnesota, to the Rocky Mountains. The treaty also provided for a 10-year joint occupation of the untamed Oregon country, without either Britain or America having claims or rights over it. To the south lay Spanish Florida, which Americans thought that geography and provenance had been destined to become part of the U.S. Americans had already claimed western Florida in 1810, but the bulk of Florida still remained under Spanish rule. An epidemic of revolutions broke out in South America, and Americans instinctively cheered the birth of their new sister republics. These upheavals in the southern continent forced Spain to denude Florida of troops in an effort to squelch the rebels. General Andrew Jackson saw opportunity in the undefended swamplands. Early in 1818, Jackson swept across the Florida border. In this invasion, he captured the two most important Spanish posts in the area, St. Mark's and Pensacola. This forced Spain to sign the Florida Purchase Treaty of 1819. Which ceded Florida as well as Spanish claims to Oregon, in exchange for America's abandonment of claims to Texas. The Monroe Doctrine, issued by James Monroe in 1823, stated that there would be no more colonization of land in the Western Hemisphere or North and South America by foreign countries. The situations and predicaments throughout the war brought America together to be the nation it is today.